My next guest is the ranking member of the House Committee on Small Business. He's served on the committee since being elected to Congress in 1994. He's an independent-minded, get-it-done kind of guy. I've had the pleasure of speaking to him in the past. He's been closely monitoring the rollout and the efficacy of the Paycheck Protection Program. Welcome, Representative Steve Chabot of Ohio. Great to see you again, sir. You know, one of the things, earlier today, I had occasion to talk to Aman Bhutani, and Aman is the CEO of GoDaddy, one of the largest e-commerce domain registration sites in the nation. And he's saying, hey, Steve, I get there's a lot going on that's right on PPP, and let's all pat ourselves on the back, but there's a whole range of firms out there, businesses that are not getting the support they need. I know this is a priority of yours. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, a number of things, and anything we do has to ultimately be done in a bipartisan manner and bicameral as well. You know, we need Republicans and Democrats working together, and we need the House and Senate and the administration working together. For the most part, we've been doing that, and we have actually modified, as you know, the PPP program a number of times since it was first passed back in March. It was part of the CARES Act, over $2 trillion bill, and about $350 billion of that was for the PPP program. And a number of things that I've been doing just this week and last week as well. We've introduced a couple of bills. One of them is the PPP and the Micro Success Act, which essentially would cover just those small businesses that are 10 or fewer employees. It would put aside about $20 billion of the next round, and there will be a next round. We don't know exactly when. I hope Congress gets its act together soon. I wanted it to happen this week. It looks like it'll be next week at this time. So that would actually target, for example, the smallest of small businesses. It would make them available for the Small Business Development Center, which we have 1,000 of them or so across the country. They would get mentoring. They would get access to capital, a whole range of things. So we do need to focus on the smallest of the small as well as everybody else.
Congressman, have you folks begun to look at fixing? I mean, I know it's hard when you're rushing in the middle of a crisis. You know, you look over your shoulder later and say, hey, what do we do? But, you know, Kanye West, LA Lakers, you know, big organizations that were getting the loans. Has that problem largely been solved, or is it still embedded in the system that it's not just small businesses that are getting this, but some very large businesses that have other capital sources are getting some of these funds?
Yeah, there's no question that because of how rapid this was put together, you know, the virus hit, Congress tried to act in real time. So some things, there were glitches. I mean, I don't think anybody envisioned, you know, the LA Lakers, for example, getting a loan, or Harvard being involved, you know, a whole range of these things. We're doing very aggressive oversight now. Nydia Velázquez, who's the Democratic chairwoman of the committee now, and she was my ranking member when I chaired the committee the last two Congresses, and now I'm her ranking member. So we worked very closely together, and we had over Mnuchin, the head of the Treasury Department, and Carranza, the head of the Small Business Administration, in oversight, finding out what's going on, what changes need to be made. The EIDL loan program, too, that's had even more challenges, things that need to be modified in that program. So we're looking at all those abuses that occurred. We think there were approximately, for example, in the EIDL loan program, there may be 5,000 or so that went awry, that people that shouldn't have got them. Sometimes it was duplication. They might have got two loans. Sometimes that they weren't eligible in the first thing. And so there are those things happening with the PPP program as well. And so we're trying to reach a balance. The balance is making sure there's no waste, fraud, and abuse, making sure that the companies that were intended to get this get them, and that. So that's the one thing. On the other hand, we don't want to make it so burdensome and over-regulated that it's impossible to get the loans out the door in real time, because this problem happened quickly and virtually took down the American economy with it.
Right. Steve, this may sound like a little bit of a personal question, but are you wearing your Liberty boots?
You saw that, huh? Not today. Yeah, I haven't actually worn it. My wife said we have to put this special stuff on them to make sure that they're waterproof. So she did that over the weekend. So I'm waiting for a parade.
Well,
actually,
to bring our audience in on the joke, you spent a lot of time visiting small businesses. I understand you
Yeah.
go out and you go meet with small businesses, take
Yeah.
their temperatures, see what's going well, help out those that are not. And you visited Dan Tormey, as I understand, of Liberty Western, which is a Western apparel. So tell me about Dan's story, PPP, and the boots.
Yeah, he got a loan, probably wouldn't have been able to stay open and keep his employees on the payroll without it. And that's the case with so many other small businesses across the country. He happens to have a Western supply place and for, cowboys, for lack of a better term, and ranching and horse equipment, a lot of stuff, to be quite honest with you, I'm not all that familiar with. And he sells boots, like, Western type boots. And I'm in greater Cincinnati, Ohio, so it's not something I'm terribly familiar with. And I saw these boots. It was love at first sight. There's stars and stripes going up on the side. And I'm not much of a shopper. And I came home and I thought my wife was going to, what in the world are you doing? She thought they were pretty cool. And I never buy clothes. She always buys my stuff for me. So, and I thought this is a way to contribute to this small business. And I put them on my personal credit card and bought the boots. And I love them, even though I haven't had a chance to wear them yet.
Well, I've seen a picture of them and they look great. So they look patriotic and they look great. Steve, let me ask you a question. And there are a lot of folks watching this. In fact, we had a very powerful last panel. Wells Fargo had a sponsored content session where it was sort of looking at how to reach into corners of the economy and not. And I ask this of everybody, Democrats who've been around for decades or Republicans. Look, what did we, I guess part of the question was, what did we get wrong? But I don't want to have an hour-long program. What can we begin to get right by ways of reaching more minority-owned businesses, more communities of color? And when we're sitting here in the middle of the COVID crisis and you looked at the impact of that and the way these communities are taking a disproportionate share of infections, minorities, all this, and so this is a big question. How do we begin to even out opportunity in the small business way in ways that we haven't done it before? Have you thought about this at all?
Oh, thought about it a lot, absolutely. And I actually represent, as I said, Greater Cincinnati, and I have the urban core of Cincinnati as well. And we have obviously a lot of economically disadvantaged businesses, and we've been working to solve that problem. And what we saw is that a lot of the smallest of the small businesses, especially in minority and economically disadvantaged locations, they didn't necessarily have a strong relationship with a bank or with a credit union. So when it came to getting the PPP loans, they had a hard time, some. Now, ultimately, a lot of them have gotten into it at this point, but early on, it was tough. The more sophisticated companies, who oftentimes were larger small businesses, a small business, after all, can be up to 500 employees under most circumstances, they had a great relationship with the bank, and they might have been treated, as a premier client. And so the little folks, the little guy, didn't have access. So at this point, we're making sure that that's taken care of. And in fact, we ran out of money, as most people know, within 2 weeks. That's how successful the program was, $350 million. So we had the PPP Enhancement Act, and in that round, we set aside a specific amount. It was $60 billion that went to the smaller banks, the smaller credit unions, CDFIs, the community development financial institutions, to minority depositories, to micro lenders. So those folks that were going to get it more into those economically disadvantaged communities. So we learned a lot of lessons as we've gone along. I actually have co-sponsored a bill with Dwight Evans, a congressman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania. He approached me with what I thought was a good idea. He said, we've had this unrest, the civil disorder out there as a result of the George Floyd killing, and we've had a lot of these businesses burned down in tough neighborhoods through no fault of their own. So can we help those small businesses? So he came up with a bill that I've co-sponsored with him, and it would say that these small businesses that were damaged, maybe even burnt out or looted, that want to reopen or get back into business, that loans would be available for them, and 75%, not all, but 75% would be forgivable. So kind of like the PPP, but that's 100% forgivable if you spend it in a certain way. I thought it was a good idea. So I'm working with Dwight Evans to get that done.
Now, thank you for raising that. Congressman, we've been taking some questions from the audience, and we have one for you from Sandra. Sandra?
Over the past year, even pre-pandemic, our 15-member women-led council has really zeroed in on the issue of lack of affordable or even available childcare, specifically in childcare deserts. We hear from women across the country, and this issue has just really exploded post-pandemic. So my question is this: are there any indications that Congress and key leadership may consider set-asides for certain industries, such as childcare and even telehealth services, in this next tranche of funding?
So,
I think
Sandra
that-
Pretorius,
yeah.
so good question on,
Yeah.
telehealth and childcare.
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. And one of the great challenges that people in our American economy face all the time. You want to go to work, but you have to provide for your children, and childcare is critical. And there are various federal programs and tax credits that are currently available. But that's one of the things under discussion in this next tranche. Now, exactly when that'll happen or how much it'll be or what the circumstances will be remains to be seen. And it has to be bipartisan, bicameral, House and Senate. Republicans and Democrats and the administration agree to it. But I think you raise a great point, and it's something that Congress is considering very seriously right now.
Just before I let you go, Congressman, this has been a great conversation. We should do it more.
Mm-hmm.
I always learn from you.
I'll wear my boots next time.
Yeah, please do, and I'll wear something special as well. But just a final question. Tomorrow on the Hill's coronavirus report, I have this cool interview coming out, as I mentioned, with the CEO of GoDaddy, Aman Bhutani. And GoDaddy, of course, is the largest registration home for domain names in the e-commerce space in the United States. And they have something called Venture Forward. And they said, look, while all of this trauma is going on in small business, there's a very different scene going on in these micro businesses, new ventures being launched, people creating businesses on the side of their work or in lieu of their work. But he said, I said, what does Washington know about that? And he goes, nothing. Washington doesn't see it, doesn't know about it, isn't part of it. And he mentioned Denison, Texas, and Denison, Texas stepping forward and saying, we need to incubate more of these. And that they've created and helped support 10 new e-commerce sites. Now, there are lots more out there, but these are ones that they helped incubate. So I would just ask you, because you're in this scene and you've already talked about microventures, mm-hmm. What do we need to do to enhance the literacy of your colleagues about that level of business and the kind of nimbleness that it gives the economy that they may not see?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that Washington doesn't know about that. And one thing I would say up front is probably they may be lucky that Washington doesn't know about it completely, because once we know about it, we're going to overregulate it, we're going to overtax it and everything else. So stay under the radar if at all possible. Now, in all seriousness, when I was chairman, we actually had a hearing on the gig economy and what's happening out there and how we can help it and how we can make sure that we don't screw it up, basically. So there's all kinds of creative ways of people doing things smarter and quicker and better and cheaper. And it certainly is an alternative to the normal job scene that we've seen, over the decades. So it's important. It's going to be a growing part of the economy, and we welcome their being successful and creative and profitable and keeping as much as possible. But in all seriousness, back to what I said originally, we don't want Congress to kill it. And if we get too involved in it, that's probably what we'll end up doing. So be successful out there, and we'll try to keep government off of your backs.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make sure he sees that, and I'll send you what he shares too. Well, Representative Steve Chabot, it's always a pleasure. Ranking member of the House Small Business Committee. Really appreciate your insights and thoughts today. And I will take you up on an exchange when you're wearing your boots.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.